Hi, I am Bjorn, and welcome back to the Wild West. Today we're doing another episode of Deadlands. That's right, this is episode 4. This is actually a really big episode. A lot of the twists of the series are going to be revealed in this one, so make sure you stay to the end. Like and subscribe if you enjoy the video. I'm not going to use up too much of your time. I'm going to go mosey on over to the separate recording room where I'm going to read the script. See y'all there.
Hey, quick reminder that this is in fact episode 4 of a series. If you have not watched at least episodes 1 through 3, I would highly recommend going back and watching those, as they are necessary to understanding the context of this episode.
I am titling episode 4, The City of Lost Angels. We're going to open on a Japanese city and around the same time period as Deadlands, obviously like 30 years beforehand. I don't know, like 1850 maybe. It burns and we can see warriors fighting in the streets. The camera moves through the fighting until we reach the palace. We see a lone samurai climbing the stairs. We see it's a much younger Hitoshi. We see him enter the palace. Inside, a long hall leads to a throne. A man sits on it and laughs to himself insanely. Hitoshi approaches him. This is Hitoshi's brother Nero. Nero sits on his throne and says, "Brother, isn't it beautiful?" Hitoshi says, "You have let the blade consume you. You have freed the evil trapped within it." And Nero says, "You do not understand. I am saving this shogunate. Without the power of the sword, we would have fallen. Now they die en masse before us." He thrusts his hands out. Hitoshi says, "Seal it away. Father made you swear to never use that power. You dishonor his legacy." Nero says, "Why would I do that? Think, brother. With this power, not even the Emperor can stand against us. We will rule Japan." Hitoshi's face turns to anguish. He draws his sword and says, "You're already too far gone." Nero stands. He holds out his own sword. It oozes with red mist. Nero says, "It is you who has gone too far. You draw your blood against your own kin. You are shogun. I will take your head." They're gonna fight. I'm not gonna really describe the fight. It's a cool samurai sword fight. I would let stunt people, whatever, come up with the action. But Hitoshi is going to win barely, despite some of the strange powers the sword has. His brother dies on the floor from a wound to the heart. As he dies, Hitoshi picks the blade up. As soon as he touches it, a demon made from black smoke appears before him. It has fearsome claws and red eyes. It says, "You fight well. Nero was a fool, but we could do great things." Hitoshi doesn't reply. The demon slithers towards him. Its black claws caress Hitoshi's cheeks. "They will banish you for this. You are a kinslayer now. You will have no home. But if you use my power, you could take it all." Hitoshi says, "I banish you. Return to the blade. You are free no longer." The demon snarls and is pulled into the sword. The red mist leaking from the blade retracts into it. It's a normal sword once more. Hitoshi puts the sword into its sheath, and we cut to the present. We see Hitoshi sitting at a fire with the others. He's sharpening his sword. It's the same sword his brother carried. We hear the whispers of the demon in his head. It begs to be released and offers him its power. Lastly, we hear the demon chuckle and then say, "She'll die where she's going. Maybe you'll use my power then. I know you care too much." Hitoshi whispers to the sword, "I will never use your power." We hear cackling laughter from the demon. And we're going to cut to the intro, which I don't think I've ever actually brought this up, but the intro song for my show, hypothetically, would be the song "People Are Strange" by Dead South. It's a cover of the original. It's pretty good, and it pretty much covers the entire franchise as a tone to me. And we're going to cut to the maze. We see the party crossing rope bridges over one of the cracked mesas that make it up. On the mesa ahead, we can see an old lighthouse. Its light shines over the maze. We see them arrive at the lighthouse. They enter through an old door. Everything looks pretty run down and is covered in mold. We see John slide his pistol from his holster as he enters. John calls out, "Who's here? Show yourself." Ghost Eye looks him over and smiles. "This is Van Horn's light," he says. "It's abandoned. I can promise you no one else will come here." John says, "What about the light? Someone had to turn it on." Ghost Eye says, "There's no one else here. Feel free to look. Van Horn set it up before he died. Can't say I know how it works, though." John turns and looks at Christine. She shrugs. He slides his pistol into its holster. Ghost Eye turns and looks at them and says, "This lighthouse is as far as I go. You have until sundown a week and a half from now to meet me here. It's a hard place to miss if you're lost in the maze. If you're not here, I'll leave. I won't be back until I bring the next group. If you're still alive, I'll take you back then. John turns to Lacey O'Malley. How far is it to the city of Lost Angels, he asks. Lacey says, I couldn't say for sure. Not far, I would think. Ghost Eye says, 2 days. Follow the bridge north. They all lead to the city. Christine says, we can worry about the city tomorrow. I'm exhausted. I'm going to hit the sack. We're going to cut to the city of Lost Angels. We see Guardian Angel Rinley, our Guardian Angel from the previous episodes, enter the city. We see other angels walking the street mixed with normal citizens. Rinley works his way to the giant stone church that sits in the center of the city. He enters and finds an angel. Rinley points to him and says, You! Send word that I need an audience with Reverend Grimm. The angel says, With Grimm? Rinley says, Yes. The angel nods his head and disappears for a while. He returns and gestures for Rinley to follow. Rinley does. The angel leads him to a door and beckons him to go in. Rinley says, This isn't Grimm's office. The angel says, You are to go in and ask no questions. Rinley looks unsure, but cautiously opens the door. Inside, he's met with the guardian angel who sits at a desk. Unlike the others, his robes are black. A metal scythe sits on his desk. He fingers its sharpened edge with impatience, and this is going to be the second guy who acts like a reaper and carries a scythe I've written in the last little bit. It's a complete coincidence, but I find it kind of a funny coincidence. Angel Rinley says, Guardian Black. He bows with reverence. Guardian Black says, You do not use my real name. Call me as I am. Now take a seat. Rinley says, Guardian Black Eye. And Guardian Black replies, cutting him off, Did I misspeak? You call me as I am. Rinley says, You're the angel of death. And Guardian Black says, So I am. Now take a seat. Rinley does. Guardian Black says, You arrived to this city without your partner. Now you asked to speak with Reverend Grimm. Tell me, where is Guardian Grant? Rinley says, He's dead. Killed by a harrowed man. Guardian Black smiles. It's the smile of a cat that's caught a mouse. How do you live? Somehow I doubt that you managed to kill a harrowed. Rinley says, He let me go. Guardian Grant thought it prudent to fire a weapon at the man. He died for it. Guardian Black replies, You were supposed to be a high-ranking guardian. You're a coward. Did you really think this news was worthy of Reverend Grimm? I think you need to learn how I earned my name. He slides his hand closer to the scythe at the desk. Rinley says, There's more, desperately. A man and a woman, John Weber. He's a gambler with ties to the devil. He's on the list. We hunted him, but he escaped. Black says, Is there a point to this, Guardian Rinley? Rinley says, He's coming here, to the city of Lost Angels. And he's not alone, neither. He's with that harrowed and Lacey O'Malley. Guardian Black stops at that. The news, man. Rinley says, The very same. There's a woman with him, too. She's tainted the same as him. Why would they come here if they know they're being hunted by us? Guardian Black asks. Rinley says, I don't know. That's why I thought it would be wise to warn the Reverend. Black nods. He stands from his place at his desk and picks up his scythe. We see Guardian Rinley reflected in its blade. Guardian Black asks, So you're afraid of the harrowed? He begins to unbutton his shirt. Slowly. He opens it up, revealing a festering bullet wound through his heart. Why aren't you running in fear? He asks. Am I not as frightening as this other? Rinley stammers, You're frightening. Black says, So as I understand it, you hunted a devil worshipper and failed to capture him. You allowed him to grow close to the city of Lost Angels. You left your partner to be killed by a harrowed. Lastly, you ran from the same man like a coward. Rinley is terrified now. He's shaking. You don't understand. I'm still of use. I can help you. Black asks, How is that? And Rinley says, I've seen John Weber's face. I can find him if he's here. Without me, you wouldn't be able to find him. Black stops and thinks for a moment, then nods. He carefully sets the scythe back on the table. He buttons his shirt back up and says, A fair argument. Find him, or I will kill you. I will make it so agonizingly painful that even hell will seem tame by comparison. Trust me, I would know. Rinley nods. He says, I'll find him. We're going to cut back to Van Horn's light. We see the party leaving the lighthouse. We hear the song Ghost Riders in the Sky by Johnny Cash play as they travel. We're going to get a montage of them crossing the maze. We're not actually going to spend too much time in the maze. As much as I could make a ton of material for the group sort of moving through the maze, it would be very similar to the last episode, as in like people just crossing the Deadlands and encountering creatures, which works as far as an RPG adaptation, but I think to make television, you kind of have to avoid it. So we're just going to sort of see some things that are, I think, standouts of the maze. We'll see a couple of ghost rock miners dangling from ropes to mine the sides of the canyons. As the group crosses a dangling wooden bridge, we see some maze dragons swimming in the ocean below. Maze dragons are basically giant sea serpents that have appeared after the quake of 68. They come through the ruins of an old city. Christine stops and studies one of the buildings. She says, I know this place. She hurries ahead, occasionally stopping and looking at various buildings. Eventually, she comes to a building that's been split by a canyon. We recognize it as her house from the flashback in episode 2. Hitoshi says, oh, hell. John looks at him. What? Hitoshi says, it's her home. John looks at the house and says, you're kidding. Hitoshi says, I don't joke about such things. Christine enters the building. Lacey says, that doesn't look very stable. Isn't that dangerous, Miss Moon? She ignores Lacey. John follows her in quickly, and Hitoshi follows him. Lacey looks around at the maze, then walks in after them with reluctance. We see them move through the rotten building. The floor is cracked, and moss and mold grow everywhere. Christine stops and studies a torn family portrait. We can see her mother and her father. John says, damn, you really were rich. And Christine says, I was, for a time. She makes her way to the living room where the fissure runs through the building. Christine walks to the edge and looks down. It's all darkness, just like she remembers. Christine says, who has the rope? John says, what? Christine says, rope. You know, for climbing. John says, you can't be serious. That's downright stupid. Hitoshi says, John's right for once. This is too dangerous. Christine says, this is where she fell to her death. The heart of darkness fell with her. It could be down there. John says, I've heard stories of what lurks in the maze, Christine. Who knows what's down there? Lacey says, if that's a genuine question, I do have a few ideas. John turns to him with a scowl and says, what do you think, newsman? Lacey holds up his hands as if in acquiescence. Christine says, John, I know more about this place than most. I'm going down. John sighs and pulls a rope from his bag. Christine reaches for it, but he pulls it away. He says, I'll go. Christine says, what? John says, if your mother fell down there, I think it's better if you don't see that. I'll go down, damn it all. I reckon I'm a fool for it. Christine hands John a lantern. Then you'll need this. We see John tie a rope onto the sturdy pillar. He tosses the rope down into the chasm. He lights up the lantern and begins to climb down the rope. As he goes, we see claw marks running down the cliff face. He stops and studies them. A feeling of unease grows. What's down in this chasm that could have left a mark like that? As he climbs down, he reaches a lip in the cliff. He holds out his lantern, and we can see Christine's mother's corpse at the bottom. It's nothing but skeleton with bits of dried cloth from her clothing. He starts to search the body, but strange insects scurry out from the bones and head down into the canyon. It startles John, and he almost goes over the edge. He stops and looks over the edge and holds out his lantern. He picks up a bone from the body and wraps it in cloth. Using the lantern, he lights it, creating a torch. He tosses it down into the chasm below. The torch falls until we can see that there's nothing but ocean water at the bottom. John lets out a little huff. He keeps searching the body but finds nothing, only broken bones and fabric. The heart of darkness is not there. John grabs the rope and climbs back to the surface. As soon as he's up, he says, it's not there. Christine says, the angels have taken it. I'm right. John says, or it went over the edge into the sea. How would the angels know to find it here, Christine? It don't make no sense. Christine says, I don't believe that. They have it, John. I'm sure of it. John throws his hands up and gives up the argument. Lacey says, it's getting dark. I say we stop here for the night. Christine says, that's a good idea. John says, I'll make a fire. You got plenty of old rotten shit around here to burn. Christine makes a scowl at him and he just smiles back mischievously. We're going to cut to Christine's old bedroom. We see her walk into it. The rotten floorboards creak beneath her feet as she walks. We see her study the old dolls she left behind as a girl. John enters the room behind her. He looks around and says, nice place. A bit youthful for my taste. Christine says, it's surreal to be back. I never thought I'd get to see this room again. John says, "That makes 2 of us. I never thought I'd go to the maze." Christine asks him, "Have you ever gone back to your childhood home?" John says, "Nah, nothing left to go back to." Christine says, "You've never really talked about it." John says, "For good reason, not pleasant memories." Christine asks, "You ever wonder why God is so cruel to us? I reckon we deserve it now, but then, we were just kids." John says, "I don't think God had much to do with it. Sometimes cruel things just happen to good folk." He stops and thinks about that and then says, "Christine, I wanted to talk to you." Christine says, "We're talking right now." John says, "Fair enough. You're so sure the stone is with the angels. What if it ain't?" She says, "It is. It has to be." And John says, "But if it ain't, what happens then?" Christine says, "Then I keep looking. Anywhere it could be." John says, "Why are you so damned obsessed? Just let it be." Christine says, "I can't just let it be, John." And he asks, "Why?" And she says, "Because my curse is getting worse. Before we started traveling together, I had a night where I almost turned." John says, "And?" Christine says, "It wasn't a full moon. I reckon it's only a matter of time before the wolf consumes me completely. My mother used to tell me stories of it. It happened to our ancestors before we discovered the stone." John says, "I won't let that happen. We'll find another way." And Christine says, "The stone is the way, and we're going to find it." We'll cut to the morning. We see the group start to leave the house. Christine takes a book from the shelf. It's in pretty poor condition, but it's the only book still intact. She stores it in her bag. They start their travels again. We see a wide landscape shots of them traveling the maze. Soon, the city comes into view as the afternoon sun hangs high. The city is massive. Half of it faces the ocean, and the other half faces the cracked mesas. A giant tent city surrounds the outskirts of the town. Near the center of the city, the buildings turn to stone instead of wood, and at its very center, a gigantic chapel stands resolute. John says, "They built this in the maze?" Lacey says, "It surprised me too when I first saw it. Follow me. I got a friend in the city." He pulls a hat tight to hide his face. They follow Lacey through the city. They enter the shanty town that makes up the outer ring of the city. As they walk, skinny, starving men watch them through cracks in wooden walls of the homes. The place has fallen apart and looms with a sense of desperation. Suddenly a man steps out into the street. He's wearing tattered clothes and has a glazed look in his eye. He holds up a large Bowie knife. He charges at the group like a madman, screaming as he does. John pulls his pistol and shoots the man dead. The bullet goes right through his head. He says, "Holy hell, he's some kind of maniac." Christine says, "Look at the bastard. He's bone skinny." Lacey says, "He was starving. This whole place has gone to hell." John looks around. People are watching him from windows and alleyways. He gestures the gun around, and they all shy back. But only just. He gets the sense that they might come out at any moment. Hitoshi says, "We need to go." Lacey points to an alley and says, "This way." They move towards the center of the city. As they leave, people slither from the buildings and begin to fight each other for the body. They stab each other and rip at the body itself, desperate for anything to eat. Christine says, "Oh Christ, I didn't think it'd be like this." John says, "It's a nightmare. The sooner we get out of here, the better." They enter a new district closer to the center. The buildings here are nicer and more put together, yet there's still a sense of unease, like the city just isn't right. As they walk, we see guardian angels occasionally milling about the city. Miners carry large chunks of ghost rock into buildings to get appraisals. We can also see bits of ghost rock machinery everywhere. The city has electricity powered by ghost rock. Lacey eventually walks up to a house. He knocks on the door. A woman opens it. She looks over at Lacey and her face turns into a strong scowl. She says, "Lacey O'Malley, what in God's green earth are you doing here? Hurry up and come in, they're looking for you." Lacey comes into the house and the others follow behind. Lacey says, "What do you mean they're looking for me?" The woman named Annabelle says, "I mean, word's been sent around the city that you were coming. There's not a guardian angel in the city that doesn't know your name. I'm assuming one of you is John Weber." John holds up his hand and says, "I am. They're looking for me too?" Annabelle says, "And her, although they don't know your name yet, miss." Lacey says, "How do they know we're here?" Annabelle says, "Couldn't say, but you're in a heap of shit. They're watching the roads. It's a miracle they didn't spot you on the way in." Hitoshi says, "Or they did." John draws his gun. He says, "Yeah, that thought just occurred to me too. He peeks through a window. We can see people moving through the streets, but no guardian angels are anywhere in sight. Christine says, it's a slight wrinkle to the plan. We'll have to move at night. Get closer to the chapel under cover of darkness. Annabelle says, the chapel? You're mad. That's the last place you want to be. Lacey says, they came to rob Grimm. They want to steal something from him. The stone your sister saw. Annabelle says, you're more than mad then. No one messes with Grimm, and for good reason. He's fought demons and won. I've seen it. That's not to mention all the angels. It just can't be done. They all fall silent for a while. Lacey breaks the silence. He says, the city has gotten worse. Annabelle says, you don't know the half of it, Lacey. Food's getting scarcer, and Grimm ain't feeding us like he used to. The fields, the crops, all been failing. It's only a matter of time before the starvation boils over. What's worse, they've been finding bodies up in the beach. All the guts removed and sliced open all clean like. They say we got a ripper like they got in London. And there's demons lurking in the night, snatching people off the streets. Even the houses aren't safe anymore. The last few weeks, the demons started dragging people from their own beds. Hitoshi says, the demons are killing people? Why don't the angels do anything? Annabelle says, that's the question. Most accept these are just the ones that Grimm missed. But he hadn't killed them yet. Can't say why. I'm worried that Grimm can't kill these. I've heard the devil himself has taken up residence in this city. John says, why are you still here if it's so bad? Annabelle says, I got nowhere else to go. This place is everything I have in the world. My husband lost his life mining the ghost rock that put me here. I won't just throw it away. Lacey says, Annabelle, your sister mentioned a map in her last letter. She said she left it with you in case something happened to her. Could we see it? Annabelle says, that silly mission of hers. It was her snooping for you that got her killed. I should have burned it, God above. I'll give you the map, but I want no part in the rest of this. I'll wind up hanging like she did. Annabelle stands up and fishes the letter from a box on the mantle. She hands it to Lacey. Lacey studies it. Christine asks, what is it? And Lacey replies, a map of the whole city. She found tunnels running beneath the whole place, a sewer system of sorts. She thought we could use it to get into the chapel. Christine says, with sewers to move through, we could avoid damn near all the angels. I bet they won't even have it guarded. They think it's a secret. Hitoshi says, that might work, although there's still some risk. We aren't even sure the tunnels lead to the chapel. John says, if they do, it definitely makes what we came here to do a hell of a lot easier. There's a sudden commotion outside. We hear yelling and shouting. The group moves to the windows. We see crowds of people swarming. The guardian angels are trying to keep the peace. Hitoshi says, what's the meaning of this? Annabelle says, there've been riots all day. Demon took a kid last night through a window. Whole bunch of folks saw it as it dragged the boy off. Real wicked shape with horns and the like. The people are upset at the angels for not doing nothing. This whole city is close to boiling over. Suddenly gunshots ring out. We see the angels shooting people in the streets. The protesters scatter as they run for their lives. We hear screams and see a few men lying on the streets dying. The angels execute them on the ground, then drag their bodies off. Annabelle muses as she watches the catastrophe unfold. This whole place is a powder keg in a match factory. You folk don't want to be anywhere near it when it blows. John says, if we're doing this, it has to be tonight. Miss Leary is right. This city is too dangerous to stay in for long. The others nod in agreement. Cut to the chapel. We see Ezekiel Grimm looking over papers at his desk. He looks almost exactly like he does in the source material. You know, a priest with gray hair and mutton chops. Angel Black enters the room. Ezekiel looks up. He says, oh, it's only you, Black. What's with all the chaos? Black says, it's nothing. A small uprising in the outer ring. There was a demon spotted last night. It took a young girl from a room in plain view of some low folk. Grimm scoffs. I've let the lesser guardians handle this for too long. The lot of them are incompetent fools. I'll take the hunt personally tonight. Black says, I'll let the others know. Grimm says, is that what the guardian asked to speak with me about? Odd thing that. They usually are too afraid to even ask for me. Black says, no, that was another matter. A man by the name of John Weber. One of the devil worshippers on our list was seen on his way here with the newsman Lacey O'Malley. Graham stops what he's doing and looks up. O'Malley's in my city? Black says, so the angel claims. We have search parties looking for him, but they haven't found anything yet. Graham says, you have to find him. Lacey O'Malley is the biggest threat to us there is. The things he's been saying in the paper. Black, he's close. Black says, we'll find him. We always do. Sooner or later, he'll turn up in a house. Grimm says, Annabelle Leary. He'll be with Annabelle Leary. Black says, what? The newsman was close with her sister. She's bound to be the only friend he still has left in the city. Annabelle's been quite the thorn in my side, but never so bad as to warrant a hanging like her sister. If I recall, she has a house in the second ring. Black nods and says, I'll check it personally. We cut back to Annabelle's house. We see John Weber shuffle his deck of cards. Christine sits far away in the corner, cleaning her handgun. Lastly, we see Hitoshi sharpening his katana. As he does, we hear sinister whispering from the blade. The demon whispers, you know they can't stop it. They're going to die to the demon. You know what we are capable of. But with my power, you can save her, Hitoshi. Hitoshi ignores the whispering and slides the blade back into its sheath. He looks over and sees John shuffling his cards. He says, I can't figure you out. And John says, not many can. Hitoshi says, I thought you would have already left us already. Help me understand. Why are you still here? Is this really all for Christine? John says, no, that's not it. Not exactly. Christine's here looking for something. I'm the same. She's looking for her legacy. Hitoshi says, and you? John says, I'm looking for a family. It's all I want. I found it with her once, and I think I can find it once more. Hitoshi nods and says, a noble goal. John asks, what about you? Why are you here? Hitoshi sighs. He says, I suppose I'm here for honor, if I still have any. Call it duty if I don't. John says, see, that don't make much sense to me. Honor's worth a flame in the hell out here. Hitoshi says, you're wrong, John Weber. Honor is worth everything. It is the measure of a man's soul. Without it, we'd be little more than animals. John says, let me tell you, there ain't much honor to go around. All the men out here are animals. Those that aren't don't last long. Honor and duty are a one-way trip to a shallow grave. There's a sudden knock at the door. Annabelle looks up with fear. John stands up and slides his pistol out of its holster. In his other hand, we see him grip his deck of cards. Christine says, what do we do? Annabelle says, I've got an escape hatch under the rug. Go! I can't be seen with you. John kicks over the rug and finds the hatch. He climbs down. The door bangs again. Annabelle shouts, just a minute, I'm coming. Christine and Hitoshi climb down the hatch. Lacey turns to Annabelle. Are you going to be all right? He asks. Annabelle says, I'll be fine. Now go. Lacey climbs down the hatch. Annabelle covers it with the rug again. She opens the door to her house. We see Guardian Angel Black standing in the doorway. In one hand, he holds his scythe. He says, Miss Leary, I presume. She says, yes, studying the scythe. Can I help you? We're going to hear the rest of this through the floor as the group sneaks through the tunnel to the outside of her house. So picture kind of like that sequence at the beginning of Inglourious Bastards where we see it shot from the floorboards from the perspective of the Jews in that movie. Something a little bit like that. Angel Black says, an old friend of yours has entered our city. I would like to find him. Annabelle says, and who would that be? Black says, Lacey O'Malley. I know you've had him here. If he's still here, I'll find him. If you just tell me where he is, you will face no consequences. I swear it. Annabelle says, I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't seen Lacey O'Malley in damn near 4 years now. Not since he got my sister killed. You should know he's no friend of mine. Black nods his head and then turns and smiles. He says, I don't believe you. He turns to two of his angels that stand beside him. You two, search the house. He points to the last one and says, you, watch the back. They may try to escape. We see Hitoshi exit a small covered passage. He squeezes up to the side of the house and carefully draws his sword. As the angel sent to guard the back walks past, Hitoshi sticks the sword through his neck. He presses his hand against the man's mouth to hide any noise. The angel falls against the floor with blood running from his mouth. Hitoshi waves the others out. They exit the tunnel and run down the alley. We're going to cut back to Annabelle's house. Black says, so you haven't seen him. You're sure that's the answer you want to give me? Annabelle says, it's the truth. The two angels sent to search the house walk up. They say, "It's empty. No one else is here." Angel Black calls out to the man in the back. He says, "Is anyone out back?" There's no response. Black walks over and finds the dead body. He returns to Annabelle with a frown on his face. "See, I knew you were lying to me, and you're gonna regret it. You two, take her to the chapel. I will see that she tells us the truth. Personally. They were here after all. I need 20 angels. We search this area block by block. I want Lacey O'Malley and his cohorts found." We're going to cut and see that evening is starting to fall. We see John and the others avoiding angels in a prolonged stealth sequence where they sneak around the houses and maybe kill one or two angels. I'm not really going to describe this scene just to save time and, keep everything sort of straightforward. But it's a cool little sequence, Eventually, they're going to reach the entrance of the sewer they found in the map. John says, "I see no choice. They won't find us here. They're going to climb into the sewer tunnels. Dangling lanterns hang down the entire tunnel. They emit dim light, just enough to fight the darkness, but not enough to fully light the tunnel. So the whole area is kind of atmospheric. They're powered by cables that run with the lantern. The whole tunnel system is powered by electricity." Lacey says, "Remarkable. This must have cost a fortune." John asks, "Why would they pay for this?" Christine says, "I don't know." And Hitoshi says, "Does it matter?" John says, "Don't know, it might. Could mean this tunnel is what we hope it is." Christine says, "It could be a way into the chapel, an escape tunnel set up by the Lost Angels." Lacey says, "That would make sense. I don't know how Cass found this place, but I owe her." They move through the tunnels. They reach a section of the tunnel where they notice scratch marks running along the walls. John studies them. "What leaves something like this?" Christine says, "Probably the same thing that left this." She holds up her hands and reveals a wet blood trail. Hitoshi says, "Demons. They are using the sewer." Lacey's eyes light up with fear. "Oh my god. Then we're in serious danger." Hitoshi says, "The newsman is right. Demons are not something to be toyed with." John says, "What? Have you run into them before?" And Hitoshi says, "I have. They are vile and evil, but most of all, they are deadly." Christine says, "You've never told me about a demon." Hitoshi says, "It's not something I like to remember. It is a burden I do not wish you to bear." John says, "Well, we can't turn back. The angels are looking for us something fierce. If we leave these tunnels, they'll find us for sure." Suddenly, we hear the sound of scraping echo through the sewers. The group turns and sees a shadow passing by one of the lanterns down the hall. They quickly duck behind whatever they can, but it isn't enough. They're in the open. They're exposed. The shadow is monstrous. We can see horns twisting its form and razor-sharp claws. It's huge, and it's carrying something over its shoulder, but we can't make it out. On pure instinct, John draws a card. It's the 8 of clubs. The group turns invisible. In a quick burst of green light, the creature turns and stares towards them. We can't really get a good look at it as it's covered in shadow. It studies the tunnel for a little bit, then moves on. Hitoshi gestures that they should move. John nods and the invisibility falls away. Christine says, "I told you not to draw anymore." And John says, "Well, shit, I didn't really see much of a choice." Lacey says, "That is remarkable. You must teach me how you do that." And John says, "Trust me, you don't want to know." The tunnel they're following leads to a large room. It's filled with ghost rock machinery. It hums and hisses. Steam exits and puffs. They're attached to a metal wall. We can see a steel door is set there. Lacey says, "This is it. This is the vault Cass described. This is another side than what she saw. We must be underneath the chapel." John cautiously approaches the door. He turns the knob and finds that it's unlocked. "Not really much of a vault," he says. He opens the door. The room beyond is dark. It isn't lit by lanterns. Mist curls from the bottom of the doorframe. John eyes it oddly. Christine holds her hand to her nose. "Ugh, what is that smell?" John, who's recoiling as well, says, "I don't know." He pulls out one of the hand lanterns and lights it. He holds it out and enters the room cautiously. We can see mist continue to curl out through the door. The humming of the ghost rock machinery is louder. There's a machine in here as well. He holds his lantern out and comes face to face with a dangling corpse. Its face is pale white, drained of blood. He lets out a slight shout and falls back. We can see his breath. The room is refrigerated by a ghost rock machine, a gigantic walk-in freezer. Everywhere he turns, corpses dangle. Everywhere he turns his lantern light, corpses dangle. Christine asks, "Is it the heart, John?" He says, "No, it's a goddamn slaughterhouse. There have to be 100 bodies here. We gotta leave." As soon as he says it, we hear scraping from down the sewer hall once more. Christine's face turns to one of horror. Hitoshi pushes Christine and Lacey into the room. John quickly turns out the lantern. We hear scraping into the refrigerated room. Suddenly, overhead ghost lock-powered lights kick on. Our heroes are hiding behind bodies that have been gutted like a cow's at the butcher's, exactly how Annabelle described the bodies on the beaches. A 7-foot-tall monster climbed into the room through the tunnel. It's got a deer skull for a face with large horns. Its body is hairy and it has large claws. The white fur that makes up its body has been covered in blood. It's got another body slumped over its shoulder. It's a young woman. We don't recognize her. It walks over and hangs the body on a meat hook upside down. Then it sets something down on a podium. It's the Heart of Darkness. The stone is covered in this strange metal construct covered in runes, as it was in the flashback earlier. The creature twists some of the runes together and spins the metal apparatus, and the heart begins to glow. The creature shrinks down until we can see its true form. It's Ezekiel Grimm. Grimm is a Wendigo. He handled this hunt personally. We hear the western cover of Thriller by Honeywagon play as we cut to credits. So obviously there's a couple of hints of this twist early on. The demons the people have been seeing are actually the guardian angels, who are Wendigos. They have been harvesting bodies, which is obviously how the people of the city of Los Angeles have been miraculously fed by Grimm, as mentioned in several previous episodes. Wow, what an episode! I'm Outro Bjorn now. Hello, I'm the outro guy. And whoa, what a twist! Oh my God, they're cannibals. Ezekiel Grimm is a Wendigo. Oh my God. What a twist that if you've played Deadlands before, you probably knew. The next episode's going to be a very exciting one. It's going to keep the momentum from this episode. We're getting into the action, the sort of third act, if you will. The second half of episode 5 will begin the third act of the story, which will carry over to episode 6. So, remember to like and subscribe if you did enjoy this video. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think is going to happen next. Give me your thoughts. If you hated the episode, let me know why, so I can tell you that you're wrong, you're smelly, and you're stinky. Everyone is. It's the Wild West, so don't feel too bad about it. You know, it's perfectly okay. All right, I will see y'all on the next one. If you need something to watch right now, you know, Thunderbolts, Suicide Squad.